Welcome back to Discover Inclusion's YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about PECS. We will discuss its history, what it is today, why it's outdated, and the alternatives for effective autonomous communication. PECS stands for Picture Exchange Communication System. It was developed in 1994 by Laurie Frost and Andy Bondi as a communication program providing individuals with functional method of communication. PECS is developed on the work of B.F. Skinner back in 1957 and Applied Behavioural Analysis, also known as ABA. The system uses symbols that can be exchanged for items or activities that the child wants. As a child progresses through the phases and becomes more confident in their communication, they can use additional symbols to extend their language, form sentences, and make comments in response to questions. There's 6 phases of PECS as is described in the training manual. How to communicate, distance and persistence, picture discrimination, sentence structure, responsive requesting, and commenting. The program is distinct in its use of prompting, reinforcement, and clear error correction, relying on the key principles of ABA. One of the key elements of PECS is using hand over hand, where the adult holds the child's hand and directs them to complete the movement. As I've mentioned, PECS is based on the work of B.F. Skinner. Skinner is known for his learning theory called operant conditioning, a technique that targets behaviours by pairing the performance of the required task with a positive or rewarding outcome, and working to decrease unwanted behaviours or tasks with a punishment or a negative consequence. Skinner argued that verbal behaviour is characterised by behaviour reinforced through the mediation of a listener. He believed that language acquisition could be explained using operant conditioning. We can see this idea in PECS. The technique is seen within the programme, reinforcing wanted behaviours with rewards and completing the action, and stopping the child from completing unwanted behaviours through physical and verbal prompting. This is where we see a clear connection to ABA, or Applied Behavioural Analysis. ABA targets to change behaviours using the contingency of reinforcement. This includes an occasion upon which a behaviour occurs, the behaviour itself, and the consequences of the behaviour, whether positive or negative. ABA aims to modify behaviour using rewards and punishment as consequences for correct and incorrect actions. This includes stopping self-stimulating behaviours, also known as stimming, reducing a child's autonomy by aiming to control their behaviour, creating opportunity for the child to produce the correct behaviour in a controlled environment, and work with the known deficits of the autism diagnosis. ABA looks at autism and other neurodivergent conditions through a deficit-based lens, as opposed to a strength-based model, which would enhance a person using the areas they excel in. I am planning on making a full video on ABA, but here I will briefly note some of its problems. One of the underlying themes is the focus on fixing people. By completing these tasks, the child will be cured of their autism. ABA very much follows the medical model of disability, in that the person needs to be fixed. Autism is not an illness to be cured, it's a neurodivergence and a disability. Autism can be disabling to individuals largely because of the environment and society's views. This is seen more clearly through the social model of disability, which highlights the barriers people encounter and explores how we can move said barriers. Many autistic adults have spoken out against ABA, citing its harmful effects on their mental health, explaining the abuse they were subject to and the trauma that they now carry. It's especially important to listen to those with this direct experience when we're deciding on interventions for our children or those we work with. It is worth noting that ABA has changed over the last 50 years. Though how much of this is branding and wording changes, versus how much is real changes to thought processes and interventions is a topic for another video. Many people continue to use PECS or a derivative of it and claim that it isn't harmful because they don't use hand over hand or reinforcement or error correction. But it has to be noted that in this case it's no longer PECS. It no longer follows the research and resources that the intervention is built on. And so any research on PECS and the subsequent positive outcomes of communication are no longer applicable to the same extent. The intervention was built from harmful techniques and does not encourage autonomy in its use. It also doesn't take into account autistic and other neurodivergent views on the intervention. In the next section, I will talk about the alternatives to PECS and the adaptations that could be made to improve it in these areas, taking this into consideration. There is a lot to be said for individual image cards that can be traded to communicate a desire or need for an item or activity. They're simple and each action the child makes has an immediate consequence. They can also easily be linked to recordable buttons and in the longer term be developed into resources that support sentence structure. This form of communication should not involve hand over hand, and the child's attempts at communication should not be stopped physically or verbally. A choice board can be a good alternative for selecting an option. It gives the child choices, for example, of snacks or activities. They select what they want by moving the picture to complete the sentence or giving it to their supporting adult. You can learn more about this and how it links to visual timetables in the Visual Timetables progression video on our channel. Aided language boards start as a single page of images used by pointing at the individual images to communicate, and can then be extended to books full of boards. An extension of this, and a communication method in its own right, is high-tech communication, which features pages of images sorted into folders on a tablet or device. Children who have learnt to read can also use text-to-speech by writing. Makaton is also an alternative communication method that can be used alongside spoken word and imagery, or on its own. A child does not need to be limited to one form of communication. For example, a child using a high-tech communication device could still use a choice board when selecting a snack. A child using image cards to trade for an activity can also use the Makaton sign. The important thing is ensuring the communication method is accessible to the child and allows them autonomy. Hopefully this video has given you some insight into PECS and why it requires more thought before being chosen as a communication method. Choosing a method of communication should be done with a speech and language therapist and be keeping the child's needs at the forefront. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. I'm more than happy to discuss the topic further. And if you've enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.